I'm Michelle Fields with Reason TV. Today, Emily Ekins is joining us from the Reason Foundation to discuss the recent results of the Reason-Rupe poll. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be with you.
So, Reason has just released the results of their second Reason-Rupe poll. What is the Reason-Rupe poll?
Well, the Reason-Rupe poll is part of a new public opinion project here at the Reason Foundation where we're exploring attitudes towards government.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the poll was conducted?
Yes, we surveyed about 1,200 adults aged 18 and over throughout the U.S. We called them on landline and mobile phones, and the margin of error for this poll is about 3 percentage points.
And what do you think is the most interesting or most surprising thing that you learned from the results?
Well, two GOP presidential contenders definitely stood out in this poll. We asked those who were going to be voting in the GOP primary who they would most like to see win the nomination. And Mitt Romney and Rick Perry were neck and neck at about 20%. So this is definitely interesting since Rick Perry is a very new entrant to the field.
So Ron Paul lost narrowly to Michelle Bachmann in the Iowa straw poll. Was this reflected in your poll?
We actually found something very interesting with Ron Paul and Michelle Bachmann in our survey. They both polled at about 7.5%, roughly equal, which is similar to the Ames straw poll in Iowa, where Ron Paul only lost by about 152 votes to Michelle Bachmann. So this tells us a few things. One is that we know that with straw polls, Ron Paul is king of the straw poll. He wins straw polls. And so we could have, people could argue that the Ames straw poll was not really that interesting because, maybe his supporters just were disproportionately represented there. But with this nationwide survey, we're not cherry picking people. This is just a nationally representative survey, and we still see them neck and neck at about the same percentage points.
How did President Obama do in the poll?
It depends. It didn't look really good for President Obama. About 48% said they disapprove of his job performance as president, with about 46% saying they do approve. So it's pretty evenly divided between those who are happy and those who are unhappy with his job performance. But I would say almost more importantly, that the disapproval is with Congress. 80% said that they are not happy with the way things are going in Congress.
Well, Republicans and Democrats are the ones who make up the majority of Congress. Do you see any hope for a third-party candidate?
Well, again, that depends. There's a couple of things that might point us in that direction. First is we noticed that the most likely response when people were asked what political party they identify with was to say they're an independent. 38% said, I'm not going to choose a political party. Now, of course, most of those independents have a pretty consistent partisan preference, but there's a reason why they're choosing to not identify with a political party and say they're independent. And we actually asked specifically about a very unconventional type of presidential candidate, asking, would you support a presidential candidate who identified as economically conservative, but also socially liberal? And nearly half said yes, that they would favor that kind of presidential candidate. So all of those things point to people being open-minded about the kinds of presidential candidates they're willing to consider.
Did you ask any open-ended questions regarding who they would support in 2012?
Yes, we allowed them to volunteer any candidate they would like to see be president or run for president in 2012. And, of course, we got a good 5% of people saying themselves. But a few interesting things stuck out. One was that about 7% said they would like Hillary Clinton to run for president. We also saw a showing for Chris Christie. He actually garnered more votes than Jon Huntsman, who is a declared presidential candidate in this race.
What does the poll tell us about the current political landscape?
That's a really interesting question. Typically, in most polls, people ask, how do you self-identify your political views? Are you a liberal or are you a conservative? So we do have the liberals and the conservatives that are economically and socially liberal and economically and socially conservative, but they actually only make up about 28% each, respectively. We've got two other groups though. One is a kind of a small government group, kind of a group of libertarian leaners. These are people who want small government when it comes to economic issues and small government when it comes to social issues as well. And they make up about a quarter of the political electorate. The fourth group we could call communitarians. They're people who would prefer government to be involved both in economic and social issues as well.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Michelle Fields from Reason TV.